All right, good morning everyone. Live stream started, so thank you all for being here today. I think the energy that you've brought over the first few weeks has been really infectious, and so this is a follow-on from our induction space. Those sessions gave you just a really small glimpse of what the organisation does in those departments. So today is about taking those deep dives. So the deep dives that we have today is development and growth in community services and facilities. But between that, there are a couple of other things that we've put in front of you around risk management and then health and safety duties afterwards. These deep dives are a real good chance to slow down a little bit and ask the detailed questions and to build our understanding of what is happening in this organisation to give us the big picture. And so the goal here isn't to rush all of this, but to strengthen our foundations and our knowledge of what is happening. I'll hand over to Emma and Vanessa, who are acting on behalf of Bob Love, who is the Executive Director of Development and Growth. So well done, team, for stepping up from your normal roles within the organisation to lead this work. So it's much appreciated.
Kia ora. Can I just confirm how much time we have for this briefing? 1 hour 45? Okay,
you have 1 hour 45.
Nice one. So,
yep.
Close it. There we go. I'm Emma Larson. We met last week. This is Vanessa Mitchell, Head of Building, and today we have Jackie Muir with us. She's our Head of Regulatory. Jackie's been with us for 4 weeks. So she is, but she's held similar roles at other councils, so she's really across the content and just learning about kind of the Selwyn flavour of things. So yeah, she'll come in and talk to you about that stuff to the best of her ability, and Vanessa and I will fill in any gaps that we're able to. So we have some slides prepared. I'm going to talk first about planning, Vanessa's going to go next about building, and then Jackie's going to follow up with regulatory. And we've planned to deliver all 3 of our presentations and hold questions to the end, just because we're conscious that we're very passionate people about what we do, and we don't want to leave you without time at the end for questions and snarl up the rest of the day. So hopefully that's okay. So if we just crack into our first slide. So this just...
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, I should have actually did a little bit of scene setting to add.
Cool.
Councillors, this morning, and many of you may not have had a look at your emails yet, but what I have done is I've sent you a range of the briefings that are going to take place between now and Christmas. So it gives you a flavour of what is coming. And I've given you some narrative around that. And what that does is it helps you forecast the information that's coming in. You will see that we have left the financial component to the end. So you'll hear a little bit about the financial services of each portfolio. But actually that will get threaded into when Alison presents her portfolio. She will talk about her portfolio, but she will also talk about the organisational wide, so that you see the collective picture of all the financial discussions you would have heard into what the organisational wide looks like. So just bear with us and keep that in mind, that these all thread into getting the bigger wide financial discussion on the 19th of November.
Buttons. Yeah, so this is a high-level overview of the Development and Growth Group, obviously headed by Robert, and Vanessa, myself, Jackie all report into Robert, and we each have a number of teams, so they are listed in that structure chart. We also have our strategic relationship managers, Neil and Sachin, who also report directly into Robert, and we'll be talking more about what they do soon. So this is a high-level overview of the financials in development and growth. So you can see there that we are funded 58% by fees and charges, 42% by general rates, and a big part of our cost is our people, as well as some professional services that we procure to bolster our business. A lot of that is also cost recoverable. And then we have this line, other expenses, so I can give you a quick rundown of what that includes, which is that's advertising expenses. Sometimes we have to put things in the paper. Building authority levies, which Vanessa will talk to soon. It includes our training budgets, printing, publications. So we subscribe to some things that support the professionals in our teams, and vehicle expenses. So we'll kick into about the planning team specifically. So I'm the head of planning in my normal role. And here you can see the 5 teams that report to me for sort of organisational and business unit management. The 3 resource consents team and the planning technical advisory team are what we refer to as the resource consents business unit, and then the policy team is a separate business unit. The main reason for that is the resource consents team has a large component of fees and charges funding, whereas the policy team is largely rates funded. So I'll talk first on the next slide about what the policy team does. So this is the team that's largely responsible for our district plan. And so taking it back to basics, what is a district plan? It's a legal document prepared under the RMA by councils to set rules for land use and development. And so why do we have one? It helps us manage growth and infrastructure provision. It helps us protect natural and physical resources. It sets the standards for built form, so all the rules that go around where a building can be placed and how big it can be and how much of the site it can take up. And it also ensures that we're aligned with national planning standards and national and regional policy direction. So typically a district plan uses zones or overlays, which are shown on the district plan maps, and that's the picture I've tried to show you there, showing a couple of different zones around this building. And when we're thinking about the district plan or making decisions in regard to the district plan, what we're really trying to think about is what is the right framework to manage the development of a piece of land. So what are the right objectives, policies and rules to have in place if this land is to be developed? So what is the density? What should the setbacks be? Where should the roads go? What sort of standard of road do they need to be? How are we going to service this? So that's a little bit of an overview of the district plan. The things that we're really, and it covers a number of issues, resource management issues. So everything from subdivision, servicing, transport, natural hazards, amenity values, built form standards, urban design, signage, earthworks, noise, landscape and natural character values, sites of significance to Māori, reverse sensitivity, and I'm sure I haven't remembered them all. So there's a range of things that our district plan does for us. So next slide. So just some quick facts about a district plan. So the council and central government agencies must comply with the district plan. There is also a feature in the RMA which we know as designations. So this is when a requiring authority, so a network utility operator, a council, a minister of the Crown, can give notice to the council that it needs to designate land for a particular infrastructure or public service. So the council is a requiring authority, so is NZTA, so is Ministry of Education. And so they can give notice to the council that they need, for example, land for a school, and the council can consider that in its planning framework, and it makes a recommendation to the requiring authority. So the decision making with the designation is flipped. Usually the council decides. In this case, the council makes a recommendation to the requiring authority and they decide. So just a little bit different there, and a thing to be aware of. Sometimes we bring decisions to the council to make a decision around a recommendation to a requiring authority. So that will pop up quite possibly very shortly in the future. So giving you the heads up about that one. So private plan changes. So anyone can request to change our district plan. Usually that comes in the form of that if someone wants to rezone a piece of land for urban development. And so this process the council must undertake in accordance with the RMA and national direction. So there's a whole process in the RMA set out for us to, for all the things that need to be considered, that a district plan change has to be publicly notified, and there's actually a second round of consultation, if you like, where people are able to make further submissions, so you can make submissions on people's submissions. So that's private plan changes. Interestingly, we talked briefly to you about RM reform recently and how the government has put in place its plan stop policy. So the council is unable to change its district plan at the moment through the normal process, but we still have to consider any private plan changes that come to us. So we have two in train at the moment, both are residential rezonings on the fringes of Rolleston. Generally, the expectation is a district plan would be fully reviewed every 10 years. Our last district plan was notified in 2001, so we were a little bit late in doing that. I think it was made fully operative in 2016, so it took a long time to resolve appeals. This one is going much faster. So, and so just on that, the policy team is currently just dealing with the last of appeals on our district plan. So our current partially operative district plan decisions were released in August 2023, and we received 26 submissions, and I think all but 3 are resolved. We are waiting for a decision from the court after a hearing in July, and we have one going to court in December and another one set down, I think, for January. And then there's one more. My slide is actually incorrect. There's 4. There's one more, which is in relation to EIP Policy 6, which is to do with settings around reverse sensitivity in the Christchurch airport. So that one we're hoping will be resolved out of court, but still water to go under the bridge there. A couple of things I thought of overnight. Sorry, just quick facts with the district plan. District plans are not applied retrospectively, so if the district plan was to change today, say, even though it can't happen, the council decided that that setbacks of 1 metre in a residential zone for buildings wasn't big enough, and you wanted to change it to 2, that would only apply to future development. So if your house is already built and it's 1 metre from the boundary, there's no change for you. You don't have to fix it to comply. It only applies to future development. So, and that existing house that's 1 metre from the boundary and the rule changes, it would have existing use rights, which I'm sure is a term that you've heard. So existing use rights are where, when the activity established, it was a permitted activity and it didn't need a consent. And those rights are protected under the RMA. All right. So I just wanted to run you through a couple of slides that just show how much growth in Selwyn over the last 10 or so years has been enabled through central government interventions. So the pink boxes are the things that central government have done that have influenced growth here, and the blue box is something that the council has done. So it sort of started back in 2016 with the Housing Accord and Special Housing Areas Act, HASHA. So this enabled rural land to be subdivided for housing outside normal planning rules. So it basically enabled a residential subdivision consent to be issued for land that was zoned rural. And so there were 2 areas that picked up this special pathway. One is Ackland Park in Rolleston, and parts of Farringdon, the parts around Lemonwood Grove School, if you know the area, also were originally consented using the Special Housing Areas legislation. So that enabled an additional 1,000 residential units in Rolleston sort of around that time. I know Ackland Park actually isn't fully developed, so it's kind of, but I guess the original thing that enabled the growth happened in around 2016. So the next thing that happened was the COVID-19 Fast Track Recovery Act. So this was obviously passed in 2020 and there were two. It was to get large infrastructure developments or residential developments in train as a means of assisting the country to recover following COVID. So it allowed some major housing projects to bypass, again, normal RMA processes for faster delivery. So Farringdon Southwest and Southeast and Farringdon Oval all were consented under the COVID-19 Fast Track Recovery Act. And between those developments, that's enabled around another 2,100 additional residential units in Rolleston. Also in 2020, we had a change to Policy 8 of the National Policy Statement for Urban Development. So this required council to consider any rezoning requests that would contribute to development capacity. And this resulted in a surge of private plan change requests, approximately 16. It gets really messy, so bear with me, but it was around 16, and some of them progressed through that process, some of them were withdrawn and took up other processes that came later, but yeah, so approximately 16. So then the next thing that happened in 2020 was the council had been working on its own district plan review, and so that was notified in 2020. And this was a key milestone to evaluate and update the district plan, and it ensured alignment with legislation, community needs, and environmental and development priorities. So then we come to 2021. The end of 2021, I think the government enacted the Enabling Housing Supply Amendment to the RMA. So this was the piece of legislation that had the mandatory introduction of medium density residential standards, which we refer to as MDRS. So this is, you might remember this is the piece of legislation that permitted 3 units of 3 stories each on every residential zoned property, and in a Selwyn context, that's Rolleston, Lincoln, Prebbleton. So that amendment required us to notify Variation 1 to the proposed district plan, and so this is what introduced the medium density residential standards across Rolleston, Lincoln and Prebbleton, and that process also prompted rezoning requests through submissions, and it also used a special bespoke appeal limited process, so not the standard RMA Schedule 1 process, but a bespoke process that had limited appeal rights. So through all those things, 1,922 hectares of land was intensified, so moving standard residential to medium density residential. 715 hectares of greenfield land, so went from rural to medium density residential, and that's across Rolleston, Lincoln and Prebbleton. And in other areas, another nearly 800 hectares either intensified or rezoned for residential development in other townships in the district. So that's a lot of growth that the council itself didn't necessarily plan to have happen, but through these kind of interventions, it was made much easier. The criteria were loosened, I guess is a way of saying that. So then later in 2022, we had the National Policy Statement Highly Productive Land introduced. This made it more difficult to rezone highly productive land. It can only proceed if there is a need for the development capacity. So I think you will have heard that there's a requirement on the council to have 30 years zoned development capacity in the pipeline. So you can rezone HPL potentially if you need it, but if you don't, if you can't demonstrate that you do, you can't. So I guess the gate was open for a period of time, and now it's been sort of shut again in terms of rezoning residential land, rural land for residential development. Next thing is our district plan decisions were notified, as I discussed before, and then I guess looking kind of to now or in the future, there's also the Fast Track Approvals Act, which is a permanent fast-track process for infrastructure and development projects that deliver significant national or regional benefits. There were two ways into a fast-track process. Firstly, some projects were approved along when the legislation was enacted, included in a schedule with the legislation. We have 3 of those in Selwyn. One is Southern Screenworks Quarry. They have a quarry out at Aylesbury, and our understanding is that they want to use the fast track process to enable a level of managed fill to be used to backfill that quarry there. We understand that they're looking to lodge. They've come and talked to us about it, but they haven't actually lodged with the EPA yet. The second one is involves the big Carter plan change at the west of Rolleston. They were included on the schedule because at the time the Fast Track Approvals Act was approved, they were still had an appeal on the rezoning of that land to resolve with the council, and that has subsequently been resolved, and that land has been zoned general residential. So we're not sure if they're going to use their place in the fast track approvals process to further to get their subdivision consents for that land. The third one is in Prebbleton. It's known as Birch's Village, I think. It would enable around 500 new residential units. We have considered that through some of these other rezoning processes, and it's been declined. So it looks like that they may choose to opt into this fast track process in the hope of a different decision. The reason it was declined was because of wastewater servicing capacity, and also just in terms of urban form, it ends up as sort of a peninsula out the south of Prebbleton. So good urban planning likes things to be nice and kind of square and rounded off. So it's more efficient for infrastructure provision and limits the boundary with the rural zone, I guess. So that's a quick run through of what's been happening in terms of enabling growth in Selwyn and exactly what the mechanisms have been to do that. So hopefully that was interesting. So policy team, financial overview. So again, the work of this team is rates funded. We do have a small amount of fees and charges because we're able to on-charge the cost of processing designations and private plan change requests. The big cost in terms of operational projects is again sort of legal and expert advice involved in resolving those district plan appeals. So onto the resource consents team. So this team, we have 3 teams of resource consents planners. The way it's structured is it's basically 3 teams of planners that do exactly the same thing. We don't stream them in terms of geography or type of consent. The team leaders work really collaboratively to give the team, a real good balance in terms of the type of work they're doing and the areas they're doing it in. They receive around, I think last year was around 1,100 resource consents. I think we've mentioned last week that we have to bolster this team at the moment with some contractors. We have about 8 that we're allocating to at the moment, but it's definitely on an as-required basis. Their cost is recoverable. It is essentially like having other team members, except they're not sitting in the team and they're not contributing to kind of that really good learning and development that we would like to have senior people in the team helping our young people with. So the other thing that we do is every building consent that comes into the building needs to have a district plan compliance check. So we have a gun team of 4 planning technicians that do the bulk of that work. So that's another key part. Our team also does the administration of the development contributions policy. So we're just well placed. I guess we're receiving all the resource consents, we're seeing all the building consents. So we apply the policy and issue a development contributions notice if one is triggered. And then flood assessment certificates. This is a new requirement that came in with our district plan. This is a requirement that every principal building, so a dwelling or a sort of place of work, needs to have a minimum floor height above the flood level. So there's a process there to issue those certificates, which are valid for a couple of years. So why do we do this work? We're managing adverse effects on the environment. It's for infrastructure alignment, it's for growth management, and because, we're required to. So the challenges and opportunities with this work, we talked briefly about this last week. There are growth pressures. The work sort of comes in waves. You'll see that we were very busy with plan changes and the like. And over the last couple of years, that's translating into being very busy in the resource consent space at the moment. And we have to deal with the work that comes to us. We have to, and I guess we have challenges as well if, in terms of timeframe compliance. If we are late, if we issue a decision over timeframe, we have to give a discount on fees. So that discount's set by the RMA. It's 1% per day up to 50%. So real incentive for us to be bringing our timeframe compliance under control. And obviously we talked about this last week, big challenge for us is recruitment of experienced planners. I showed you some of these stats last time. This has an extra month in it, and I just wanted to show you that, we were really busy with plan changes a few years ago, and you can see that this has translated into us being much busier now in terms of the resource consent applications that are coming in. So I think that September number 136, I think it is, that was an all-time record for number of applications received in Selwyn in a month. So next slide. Again, some all-time records in terms of the decisions being issued. That 134 in October beat our previous record of 115 in August. So you can see it's just exceptionally busy, and the work coming in and the work going out the door is just much higher than it ever has been before. So resource consents, financial overview. So again, we have a big component of fees and charges funding, 61%. Our biggest cost is our people, again, and that consulting, legal and professional services is both the planning consultants that we have to engage to bolster the team, but it's also other experts as well that support resource consent processes. So, for example, ecologists, noise experts, landscape experts, the types of professions that we don't employ in-house. We don't have enough work for them as an FTE, but that we'd still need to contribute to these planning processes. Again, those are cost recoverable.
Cool. We'll move into the building team now. So this is the building team structure. We've got 58.8 FTEs across the department, so it is one of the biggest units within council. And last week we covered the difference between the BCA, being the Building Consent Authority, and the TA, Territorial Authority functions. So you can see there in the diagram that we've got those two groups split. And out to the left-hand side, we've got our quality team who have overarching responsibility to deliver systems and procedures across both areas of the business and make sure that we meet our requirements for BCA accreditation, and also reviews with MB to ensure that we can continue to perform as a high-functioning team and deliver building consents and other services to our district. So why we do what we do, in terms of the BCA side of things, it's about building consents, doing building inspections and issuing co-compliance certificates. That's the core part of our work. We do that work to meet national standards and ensure buildings are safe for people to occupy. In terms of budget, we are largely fees funded, and we have a huge investment requirement in the systems that we use as well. I did mention last week that Alpha One, the current computer system that we're using, is now a sunset product, so we're working closely with our digital team at the moment to transition to a new product mid-next year. Challenges and opportunities, similar to Emma's team, the building network in New Zealand. There's about 1,500 building officials across the country, so it's always challenging to get capable people and skilled people into the business. And often we find we're growing our own from scratch at times because we just can't meet the demand with the current workforce out there. Digital transformation I've touched on. The other thing I was going to touch on here in terms of challenges and opportunities is I realised last week we didn't have time with Simpson Grierson to get through the Building Act reforms. So essentially what Minister Pink is aiming for with all the reforms is less regulation, providing efficiencies in the consenting system and reducing building costs. So some of the things you may have already heard about are things like the voluntary consolidation of BCAs and bringing private providers into the market. So there is one private building consent authority that's set up in Rolleston, Building Consent Approvals Limited. That competition is designed to make everyone think differently about how they're delivering their services and create additional efficiencies. Proportionate liability is another one that's on the cards. They're creating the legislation for that, and it will be great if it happens. But I'm not holding my breath at this point. We actually need insurers to come to the party and back builders, etc., with decent insurance cover so that that liability will sit where it lies. There's going to be an increased focus on hazards and a greater use of sections 72 and 73 of the Act, where the TA will issue notices. That's for things like flood-prone land, etc. Fair to say we don't have a lot of detail on it at this stage, so when we know more, we'll be able to share that information with you. And the other one that's floating about is granny flats. So the RMA portion of this has been enacted, and we're waiting on the Building Act legislation to come into force early next year. So it'll be for buildings less than 70 square metres. They'll be exempt from requiring building consent. There will still be some requirements wrapped around it for the people building these buildings to complete some forms and complete records of work and supply those to councils. And the reason for that is it has an impact on our PIM and LIM functions. So a LIM is a land information memorandum. If you purchase property, you will typically get a LIM before you purchase to do your due diligence on what approvals have been authorised for that piece of land. And if we don't know that a granny flat's been built on it, we can't put that on a LIM. So the forms are intended so that we hold some information and know that building has been put there. It will also help us in our TA functions if we get complaints about properties and what the neighbours built next door. We'll know whether they've done that under the granny flat legislation as part of our investigation, and it may mean we don't necessarily have to do a site visit to confirm that. In terms of the building consent process, I thought this diagram is probably quite a useful one just to help you understand the journey that a customer goes on when they go through the consent process. So this starts out right at the beginning. Somebody buys a piece of land, they want to build a house, they will generally go and visit a housing company or an architect to do some design concept drawings. Depending on the complexity of that build, they may choose to obtain a PIM, a Project Information Memorandum, from the council. That document is about council giving information to the property owner about everything that we know about that piece of land they're going to build on and the infrastructure and that is in place that will affect their project. It will also include a development contribution certificate if DCs are payable and a RM certificate if there's any non-compliances with the district plan. Once they've got that information, they'll progress to develop design. They can also apply for a resource consent at that time if they need to have a resource consent. But once they've got their documentation complete, they can then lodge their building consent application with the council. We go through and check that the work that has been done by the professionals aligns to the requirements of the building code. And as well as our in-house staff that check the bulk of the code clauses, we have some specialists that are seconded to us on contract. So they're people like structural engineers or fire engineers to look at really detailed projects and deal with those complex issues. Throughout the building consent process, we can issue requests for further information if information's not clear or we find non-compliances. But once all of that is resolved, we then issue the building consent. That then enables work to start on site. Throughout the course of construction, we'll do a range of inspections to make sure that the work being built is being carried out in accordance with the consented plans. And all going well, at the end of that time, we will then issue a co-compliance certificate to the customer. Just in terms of building consents, some average numbers here. So typically we're doing just over 200 consents a month at the present time, and around 1,200 building consent inspections a month, and around about 170 co-compliance certificates get issued each month. Statutory timeframes are running well. You can see there from the graphs, well up around the 100% most of the time. And just in terms of building consent fees, we do get a number of inquiries about our fees from time to time. To help support customers know what the cost of a building consent is going to be, we have put some estimated costs for different building typologies on our website. And for your information, we collect a number of levies for different organisations. So building research levy goes to MB, and that goes to Brands, Building Research Association, and the building levy goes to MB. The third levy that's up there is the Quality Assurance Levy. That is designed to fund our internal quality team and also cover the cost of the software that we use for consenting. In terms of our territorial authority functions, once again, just a range of functions and the average numbers of those that we deal with on a daily basis down the side. The two at the bottom, I can't really put numbers against because they're a bit all over the place. So earthquake-prone buildings has been a bit of a moving feast over the years that legislation's been in place. We now are down to 38 earthquake-prone buildings within the district. 3 of those have exemptions. An exemption means that they're exempt from requiring to strengthen that building, and there's specific rules in place that you have to meet in order to achieve an exemption. So there are things like really low occupancy. So a lot of the exemptions we've issued are on, I can probably tell you what the 3 buildings are actually. The Rifle Range or Rifle Club at Southbridge, they've got a very small membership. They meet once a month for very limited hours. Mead Hall, which is a council-owned facility, once again, very small community, very infrequently used facility. And then the third one is a historic building on a homestead up in the high country. Sorry, the name escapes me at the moment. In terms of the dangerous, affected or unsanitary buildings, this is not a function we carry out often, but it is something you need to be aware of. So last year we updated the policy, and a number of you were involved in the hearings for that policy. It's freely available on Council's website. The reason I wanted to talk to this today is because when we do get involved with dangerous and unsanitary buildings, quite often it becomes front page news, or you will hear directly from your constituents about Council's actions. So it's important you're aware of what they are. The threshold to meet either dangerous, affected or unsanitary under the Act is really high. So the image I've put on screen there is what you could call an unsanitary building. It's got rotting weatherboards and fascia on it, which means that that building is now allowing moisture from the outside into the building. So I won't go into too much detail on that, but just wanted to bring it to your awareness, and as and when we have any issues of that nature, we will bring them to you. It's fair to say most of the investigations we've done into dangerous and unsanitary buildings in the past have been pretty significant and serious cases, and they have quite an impact on our staff as well, because our staff, when they go out to investigate these, have to enter people's homes and see the conditions that children and families are living in. There was one house last year the team did an investigation on, and literally the oven door was open, being used as a heating source. There were children running around in their nappies, eating chips and that off the floor, with faeces from rats and mice and not pleasant stuff. Generally, septic tanks and sanitary systems are not working, so it's pretty unpleasant for the team. Our financial overview, as you can see, fees and charges make up the largest portion of our finances. We've got about 4 million there from general rates. What's not shown on this slide is the support charges. So in terms of support charges, building team receive about $3.6 million worth of support charges from across council. But you can also see there currently our surplus is sitting at 4. So in terms of fees and charges, we are not meant to make a profit, so our fees and charges have to be actual and reasonable to meet the legislation. And that's always a challenge, just to work out how many consents we're going to have coming in each year and estimate what those fees and charges look like in the forecast for the coming year. Just talking a wee bit now about the strategic relationship managers. So we spoke about them last week a little bit in terms of their purpose, so understanding our partners' projects that are coming in and coordinating pre-application meetings with them, providing that single point of contact and troubleshooting things across the various council functions, ensuring those partners make applications for the various types of approvals they need as in the right order as and when they need them, and providing regular updates to those partners on how their projects are tracking through the business. So they really support information flow and project understanding across our council departments as well. This is a good example which shows how the strategic partners working with the business are actually helping come up with some really unique ways of dealing with growth. So Kevlar Homes, when they started developing Harrow Green, came to us, and we had really good upfront meetings with them to look at innovative ways to help them save money and time across their project. So that resulted in what we call a multi-proof application through the building team, so that we're not processing each house 100% every time. And because there are repetitive houses, so we've processed them once and then we can issue multiple consents from that basis. And the article that was actually put in the press shows that we're currently, the build time has increased from 13 months to 19 months across the country. With this project, they were able to shave 7 months off of that. So the land development process improvement is a project that the strategic relationship managers are working on across council at the moment. So the project aims to streamline the end-to-end land development process from concept right through to final built product. And we're doing it to improve the customer experience, reduce delays and enable efficient, high quality outcomes for those projects. So this piece of work kicked off earlier this year, and a process mapping part of it has been completed, and we're now moving into implementation and delivering those improvements into 2026. So I'm just going to hand over to Jackie now to talk to the regulatory team functions.
Good morning, everybody. My teams are over sort of a wider regulatory function in terms of what it is that we have to implement and operationalise from central government. So I currently have 3 teams, but I also have an additional food and alcohol licensing contractor, and we also have an after hours contractor for delivering animal management services and also for noise services. I have a chief alcohol licensing inspector who is responsible for implementing and operationalising the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. We do work very closely with our external contractor, food and licensing team, and we also have a responsibility through that contractor to support the district licensing committee function, which is part of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act requirements. We have a compliance team. I have a team leader, and we have a principal advisor and 3 compliance officers, and we have some admin support within that team. And then we have an animal management team, and that's led by our team leader, and we have 3 full-time animal management officers, some admin support, but we are also very reliant on an external contractor to deliver the animal management services after hours. This is my wider remit in terms of what it is that we have to deliver from central government legislation. So I have a number of acts that central government develop and then hand out to local government to operationalise and implement. So it can be the fast and the furious often within my team. So what I will do is I will focus probably on the main ones that we deliver, and that is the Dog Control Act. So a big part of the animal management team is about delivering functions under the Dog Control Act to prevent dogs from being a nuisance and preventing harm in our community, while we're also responsible as a district to provide for fair and equitable use of our land for dog owners to exercise their dogs. The dog control or animal management team is predominantly funded through dog registration and through infringement offence notices. We are not heavily reliant on our ratepayer contribution for this particular team. Some of the main projects or things that we're managing at the moment is we've got a very high number of dogs that we need to register every year here in Selwyn. So at the moment we've got about 16,500 dogs as at the 30th of June 2025. We expect that number will rise again this coming financial year. We've got about 11,500 dog owners that we need to deal with in order to register their dogs. We are a fairly safe district in terms of any issues relating to dogs. We don't have a lot of dog attacks. In fact, we had last year just under 52 dog attacks. So that's a very low number compared to the number of dogs we actually have in our district. The number of complaints we get are generally around barking and wandering, and we receive just over 1,000 complaints every year that we need to respond to. The dogs that we impound for wandering or for other issues, we generally rehome if we can. We have a very, very low percentage of dogs that we actually have to euthanise, which is a very good news story here in Selwyn. So I'll move on to Food Act because that's another big area that we have to administer under the Food Act. We currently use contractors to administer the Food Act for us. I'll just give you a percentage or a proportion of businesses that we have operating here in Selwyn. At the moment, we currently have 391 registered food premises here, with the majority of them operating across Rolleston, Prebbleton and Lincoln. We've had a slow increase from the previous financial year. We had 364, but just to give you an idea, we've actually already registered 356 food businesses this year already, so we expect to see a significant increase in the number of food businesses operating across Selwyn. In terms of alcohol licensing and around on, off and club licences, in 2024 or 23-24 financial year, we had 149 on licences, which would explain a tavern where you go to consume alcohol on the premise. Off licences is bottle stores. We had 46 last year, and we had 33 club licences. This financial year, 24-25, we had 72 on licences, 47 off licences, and we had 33 club licences, so no change year on year there. So we have a total of 152 licensed premises here in Selwyn. Once again, we are expecting to see an increase this year as the district grows. We had 127 special licences issued in the financial year 23-24, but we saw a significant increase in people that were applying for a special licence. And what is a special licence? It's when someone has a special event and they need to apply to us to operate and sell and supply alcohol for a special event. So we had 191 for the financial year 24-25, so we did see an increase there. We have a large number of duty managers here in Selwyn. Currently we have 254 duty managers, and with a large supermarket opening up like Pack and Save, there's a requirement for them to have duty managers present while they're selling alcohol. So we did have an increase in applications for duty managers that came through when with the Pack and Save opening. We're looking at, from an environmental health perspective and also Resource Management Act, we have a role to provide a noise control service, and we responded to 579 complaints in the financial year 23 to 24. In the year 24 to 25, we actually saw a significant increase to 706 noise-related complaints. And this could be down to the intensification and development of our district. We also operate a compliance team. We have a team leader, 4 compliance officers. Now, their key responsibility really is to monitor and inspect resource consent requirements. So when people apply for a resource consent, often there's some monitoring requirements that go with that consent. So my team work really closely with Emma's team to ensure that the people that are operating are complying with their resource consent notices. So part of that is that we conduct site inspections, record findings and into the council system. But we're also responsible for responding to complaints and investigating other issues under Resource Management Act, under the district plan, and just generally under any other bit of legislation that sits within my remit. Now, that is not funded by any type of registration or fee or charge. Basically, what we are trying to do is be really good regulatory stewards and support regulated parties to do the right thing, to promote, to educate and to prevent, so that we're not having to take or spend too much time investigating and taking enforcement action. So I also have, we also have a parking function where we monitor parking to ensure that there's fair and equitable use of our time-restricted parking areas, that we are supporting safe roads and preventing harm from cars that are illegally parked, not warranted, not registered, and also making sure that we're maintaining our infrastructure in terms of not damaging our berms. So that is an overall picture. I've put a chart together just to give you an indication about all of the areas that sit within my team. So we have an environmental health team that provides functions under the Health Act. We have a requirement to make sure public swimming pools are monitored. We have a role in water quality and work really closely with Environment Canterbury. We also have a role to ensure that when fairgrounds operate, that the amusement devices that operate within the fairs that we have here are safe. So we co-regulate the Machinery Act with the WorkSafe team. We have a small role in Hazardous Substances and New Organisms Act, and that is just, once again, a role that we have and co-regulate across other central government agencies. And probably not such an issue for us at the moment, but we do have a role to play in freedom camping, although not currently an issue here in Selwyn. Possibly as the district grows, we might see an increase in complaints about people that are freedom camping across the district. So that is it from me? Oh, financials, yes. So I still have a bit of work to do to confirm some additional revenue streams, which I think we may have not forecasted. So at this stage, we have a fees and charges cover about 41% of what we do, and then we are basically drawing on rates by about 59%. But as I said, I'm still confirming some of our revenue streams from the food and alcohol licensing team.
So just in terms of some key information for you around communications with our teams. So across all of our teams, we typically run duty rosters. So if customers are ringing in with inquiries, we can give them frontline advice, particularly for building and planning. And I think that's something Jackie's working on with her team as well as she develops them a bit further. We promote pre-application meetings for people applying for consents, be it resource consent or building consent, particularly if they're complex, they want to do something a bit different, or if they're a big commercial project, and that's so that we can plan well and get a good understanding of those applications before they come in and build good teamwork around those. Resource consents and building consents have online portals for lodging applications to make it easy for our customers as well, and I know Jackie's also working on making all of the application forms for her area electronic at the moment too, to streamline things for customers. In terms of communications we push out to customers, building and planning typically run regular newsletters to our core customers just to remind them of any changes that are coming and give them tips and tricks on applications to smooth things for both parties. We also run community events, so Emma's done a great job on engaging with the planning community. How often are those? Quarterly? Twice a year. Building used to run quite a few regular events, and we're at the point of trying to get back into doing that as well, because it's about promoting that networking and making sure that we're seen as a face, not just hiding behind that screen of council. We have a lot of website content across all functions, so that's enabling people to self-help, look up information and find out more detail before they contact us, or use that as their main source of information in the first instance if they so choose. And we also have a number of feedback channels. So regular surveys go out, we have customer feedback forms online, and that's a really good way for you too, if you get any people commenting to you or asking you to follow up on a concern that they have about a process, you can actually direct them straight to that feedback form, and that will put it direct to the people that need to address that concern.
So this is the part where we tell you that everything that we've just told you is subject to change through various reforms. So yeah, we've talked today about the RMA and Building Act reform, significant reforms. We know they're going to be significant, but we just don't have enough detail yet to kind of forecast the impact that that might have on our resourcing, our budgets, that sort of thing. The RM reform, we're expecting towards the end of this month or maybe beginning of next month. So we'll get an idea of what's proposed then, or clearer idea. Building Act is early next year. Food Act is also next year. So in the meantime, our teams are busy managing all of the things we have to manage in the medium term within the current system. So it's easy to kind of focus on the future and all these changes that are going to be made, but until they're actually made and implemented, we're still working in the current systems, and certainly from an RM perspective, you know, we expect that to kind of be at least another 2 years before any change happens. But again, we don't know. The RM reform's coming. Hopefully it will have all the answers. Vanessa talked a little bit about digital transformation and automation. This is a constant conversation. The planning team is kind of a little bit behind in terms of the technology it has, particularly resource consent processing, particularly managing consents and the timeframes and all of the different things that influence that statutory clock, which is, you know, very important to us in our customer service and how we're meeting expectations. And again, another challenge or thing that we're constantly focusing on is how can we meet our community expectations? How can we, you know, a regulatory department, people aren't really that excited to be dealing with us, but how can we make sure that we're a friendly face, that we're helpful when people are dealing with the processes that we administer? And yeah, that's a constant sort of thing front of mind. Customer service is front of mind for us all the time. So I think that is the end of our presentation, and we've left you lots of time for questions over a broad range of stuff. So
yeah, great. Look, great presentation, and I should have pointed this out at the start that all of the slides that have been shown to you today will be loaded into...
We've just put them into the resource centre.
Great. They are currently loaded into Diligent. So you have these as a reference point for not just now, but also going forward in the future. And if there are questions that arise that you think of after this process, I'm happy to receive those back in as well, that we can work through those. So I will start, taking questions from who is at the top on the screen here. So hopefully everyone's touched the screen on their microphone and you can see your order list of speaking. But John, you are up first.
Yeah, thank you. A comment that some of the widths of the roads in some of the subdivisions, when you get two vehicles that are slightly larger than a car, like commercial vehicles, it reduces it to single lane. And the question, not necessary for an answer now, is that how do emergency vehicles get on apart from just ramming through? And then related to regulatory, some people think they're doing a favour by enabling the flow of traffic by slightly parking on the berm, and then they find out that that's an expensive mistake. And the second one is probably more of a comment. Given the growth, and I'm looking at Darfield here, although aware of the whole district, secondary school and primary school really are an importance, and just wondering if there's been any discussions with the Ministry of Education on possible designations of land for a primary school.
Just on that last one, we're having constant discussions with the Ministry of Education. One kind of benefit of a fast-growing district is that the Ministry of Education can sort of get in at the plan change or subdivision stage to secure land for new schools, and that's what we're seeing in Prebleton. We're expecting a notice of requirement any day now for a new school in Prebleton, which I think is the target is to open that in 2027, new primary school. And my understanding the next school is one for Lincoln in the Earlsbrook subdivision. Again, the land's been secured and we're expecting a notice of requirement for Lincoln as well for another primary school. Your other questions were to do with road widths.
So while you're just thinking about that, I'll just add in, councillors, what we're hoping to do, Emma and I talked about this morning, is have the Ministry of Education come and provide a presentation probably early in the new year. So we meet strategically with them every quarter. There has been some changes in terms of how the Ministry is now set up to facilitate school builds and take a much more proactive approach. So this is the group now that's meeting with the SDC team to take a bigger picture. And what we do is we share information about where the growth is, where are the things that are happening. So I think it would be really nice to add that piece of jigsaw to the puzzle for you, for the Ministry of Education to come and present early in the new year.
And just on your point around parking, the development of new subdivisions and the width of roads, I can't actually comment on the width of the roads, but I do take your point around practicality versus aesthetics and damage to the berms, and that's something that we will be looking at in terms of using discretion when we can and when we can't going forward.
Thank you.
And sorry, I'm going to chip in again. With regards to the width of the roads, when Tim's team come to do the presentation and you hear about roadings, there's a collaborative approach that happens across the organisation where Jackie's team will feed into Gareth's team about widths and sizes of roads. So I'm sure Tim has taken note of that and it'll be covered off in his presentation next week.
Wonderful, thank you. Elizabeth?
How many FTE parking wardens do we have at the moment?
We currently just have one.
Okay. So the other questions, I'll just do them in order. The granny flats, obviously the granny flats that we've got the new changes for, do they need to fit within the district plan rules? For example, how close they are to the boundaries, etc., etc. And how will council evaluate the rates that granny flats are going to pay?
So basically the granny, in terms of RMA, the granny flats provision has been introduced through a national environmental standard, which sits alongside our district plan. So it's a set of rules that apply nationally consistently. But my understanding is that our plan, or from what we know about these granny flat rules so far, our plan is very enabling of we call them minor residential units, and we're very enabling of that in our plan. So we're not really expecting there to be much difference from the National Environmental Standard for granny flats.
And just on the rating side of it, we don't have the full information yet because the Building Act side of things is still being finalised. So we're expecting that there'll be a requirement for a PIM or similar document to be lodged, and at that point that information will be in council's system and it will be able to go through to our rating department to apply appropriate rates for that improvement.
Okay, it's because there's obviously a number of existing granny flats already around the district who are paying rates. I just wondered who I speak to in terms of staff as to how that's been calculated. So obviously, my big question is always the granny flats and the tiny homes. Have you seen that the tiny homes will be included in the granny flats bill? Is it going to be pretty much structured the same, or is it going to be two separate things, or the tiny homes not at all provided for in the granny flats?
As far as I'm aware, tiny homes is not provided for in the granny flats legislation. But at the end of the day, what is a tiny home? It's a small building. You know, it's a terminology that people have been using to try and get around the building legislation. And at the end of the day, the one thing I've always said to people when they come to me about tiny homes is, are you building a building or are you building a vehicle? You can follow the Building Act or the Land Transport Act. Make up your mind.
Okay, so this is the meaty question for me because I've always struggled to get my head around the district plan. So plan changes with the district plan. What is the cost? Is there a cut-off time frame? Can the council, as a council, can we bring changes to the district plan?
So under normal times, yes, the council absolutely can change its own district plan. But as part of the RM reform, at the moment, there is the government's plan stop policy, which means that at the moment we're not allowed, as of right, to change the district plan. There are exemption pathways and ministerial powers that can be exercised, but we're not in direct control of either of those. We would have to make a request. Sorry, what was the other question?
So I'll just read it again. At the time frame as in when people can put an application in for the district plan, is there like within the first 6 months will it become operative, or how does that work?
No, there is a restriction on when people can seek a private plan change if that matter has been considered through a plan change process within the last 2 years. So our district plan decisions were issued in August 2023, so we're past that 2-year period. The council can exempt that as well, so or make it decide to accept a plan change within that 2-year period. So when we receive a plan change, there is a statutory process that has timeframes associated with it. You can deal with the plan change request sort of as short as within a say 6 to 9 month or 9-month time frame, but I think there is an overall time frame where they must be decided within 2 years of notification. So somewhere in that gap.
Thank you.
I'll get some more information for you, Elizabeth, on that secondary dwelling charge, but my understanding at the moment is it's a secondary charge on things like pools and library and reserves, things that are like community use type spaces. So I'll get some more information on you for that. And regarding the private plan change request, I had mentioned in our induction last week, and it's also in my report for next week to council, that I have written to Minister Bishop asking him if he can exercise his powers for district plan changes. So I'm awaiting a response from that, but there is more fulsome information in my mayor's report for next week. Samuel.
Cool. What would qualify an infringement or call out for a noise complaint, and what's the process regarding that?
So if a customer believes that the noise is excessive, then they call either our after hours contact centre or our customer call centre here, and we have a company that goes out and listens to the noise. If they deem it to be okay, then there's no further follow-up. If they deem it to be excessive, then they will have a conversation with the regulated party and ask them to turn it down. If we receive a further complaint and the noise is excessive, then we would issue an excessive noise direction, which means that they have to turn it down. And then if they still don't turn the noise down, then we go on site and we seize the equipment from the occupant of the property, and we use police when we go in and do those seizures.
Cool. But there's no specific decibel rating, it would sort of be...
Like we do have ratings within our district plan, but there's two different types of noise. So there's noise that can be emitted from an industrial commercial activity versus just general noise that we get from stereo music. So we don't use readings for those excessive noise complaints that we get for music and stereos, but we might use noise measuring devices for commercial and industrial activity.
Cool. And one other. What's the incentive for Selwyn District Council to be issuing no warrant, no reg tickets?
Okay, so back in the 1960s, the local government were given warranted powers to contribute to road safety through making sure that cars were legally warranted, i.e. fit and proper for use on our roads, which is measured by warrant of fitness. And that was because the police were unable to deliver some of those services due to the resourcing demand. So that is the purpose, really, is to make sure that our vehicles are registered and warranted, i.e. fit for purpose on our roads.
And are we getting payment from those infringements, or is that going to the LTSA or police?
So we do get most of the revenue that we generate comes back to local government or to Selwyn District Council. There is a small proportion that we are supposed to pay back to New Zealand Police for delivering that service.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Aaron.
Thanks. Couple of questions. The private building consent authorities, who carries the risk if they were to make some sort of mistake that had serious implications?
So just like all councils, they have to go through the BCA accreditation and registration regime. So part of registration is MB looking at what means they have to cover any liability that they have while they're operating and for 10 years thereafter.
The strategic relationship managers is a lot of benefit for the partners that we work with. Are those roles essentially self-funding?
No, that rate's funded, those roles at the moment. My understanding is that there's thinking going on and talking to Christchurch City who have similar roles, looking at how we can partially or fully fund them through fees and charges.
Yeah, Aaron, just to add into that, so those roles we've brought in were new roles, so it was a trial to start with. We're now seeing the benefit, and the intention would be that the strategic partners that use those roles pay for the services that are provided. So we're, I think, coming to the end of the 12-month trial period, and we're comfortable and confident enough that it does add significant value, and so we'll be looking for a fee-for-service approach.
Very good. And just a comment to follow up on Sam's question about warrant tickets. The Lincoln Garage, I heard anecdotally from one of their workers that 8 of their customers' vehicles were parked outside ready to get warrants and they were ticketed. Perhaps a slightly more, proactive approach to go and talk to the person in the garage and say, there's these 8 cars here, I notice they don't have warrants, what's the plan for them, rather than piss everybody off.
Thank you, take your point. I don't know about that situation, but I'll certainly look into it.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. I'd hope those people had done the appeal process through council for that. Next up, we have Tracy.
First of all, thank you to the three of you. From my perspective, really good and clear presentations, so thank you for that. This is just a small thing about the average build time was on one of the slides, on the Kevlar slide. Is that just relating to commercial builders or developers, or is that average time relating to all buildings, including owner builders, if you see what I mean?
I believe that relates to similar developers where they're doing the land and building development themselves. So one party doing end-to-end process
So
across
bigger,
the country.
more likely to be bigger.
Yes.
So do you have the figures on what if for the smaller one-off owner-builder type, what time frame are they looking at?
Not at hand, but I can.
No,
I can certainly look into that and come back to you.
that would be useful. I'd also just make the comment, just generally, I don't know about other councillors, I don't find averages particularly helpful. And that may just be me, but because it's not as good as perhaps median, so that we see more of the split of the volume. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Denise?
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Is that loud enough? Am I loud enough? I'll go a bit nearer. I've just got one question. Is it possible, you talked about the MDRS zoning, under the new RMA reforms, will it be possible to revisit that? And also, is it possible to, or have you looked at further consideration of vehicle access with accessibility for 3 homes on one section?
Yeah, no, great question. Up until earlier this year, we were of the understanding that the government was going to make an amendment to the RMA that would enable councils to reconsider the wide, really blunt application of MDRS across our townships of Rolleston, Lincoln and Prebbleton. Mm-hmm. The challenging thing with MDRS is that it is enabling legislation, but it's not requiring legislation. So the councils are required to enable 3 units of 3 stories on each lot within those 3 townships, but we can't make people do that. So in terms of delivering on a density in an efficient way, we just have no idea where this density, well, we have some idea, but theoretically it could pop up anywhere in those townships, or what we see a lot of is people would prefer actually just to have the single house on a lot, like the traditional Selwyn typology. But then we see some areas where there's maybe duplexes. We're certainly not seeing multi-level development. It's all pretty much single story. So yes, it's a challenging policy to implement. Where do we provide the additional infrastructure to support that greater density? And it's a challenge for our infrastructure teams. So yes, we are looking out for an opportunity to kind of investigate what that, if there is an opportunity to sort of reevaluate where that level of density is provided. And the mechanisms for doing that, and whether that's what the community actually wants, or is it some sort of middle ground, or all of those sorts of good questions we were preparing to go to the community and ask, and now we're not. So yeah, we're waiting for the RM reform, and hopefully there'll be further direction on what we can do there.
Sorry, just to chip in, Denise, I think councillors were expecting towards the end of November, early December, to hear some announcements from the Minister. That will hopefully give us a level of detail that will enable us to understand the next stages. So whilst we have a high level, there's going to be change, and we've known that for a wee while, we're lacking the level of detail, which makes it challenging for the team to make some assumptions about what that may mean for the Selwyn district. So hopefully more clarity towards the end of November, early December.
Thank you.
And I guess further to this, the RMA reform, I get it, it's incredibly hard because we just don't know where these things are going to land. And I know coming into the early part of next year, we were going to do some area plan engagement. How much of an effect is the RMA going to have on our area plan engagement? Because that's where I sort of saw some of this, the MDRS feeding into that area plan. But because everything's thrown up in the air, I'm just trying to get a gauge on where that lands.
Do you want to take that one, Kath?
Yeah, look, great question, definitely, and that's what we will look through when we go out and we talk with the communities on the area plans early in the new year. We will talk about density, and we will look at the RMA will continue to enable growth through the changes, and we know we are going to see that. We're also going to see the stronger emphasis on the spatial planning. So the work that we have started to kick off on the area plan program will assist with the direction of travel that we are seeing, but it'll also give an opportunity for us to come and workshop with you all on what that looks like for the relevant communities and take that out to engagement. Yeah,
Thanks, Kat.
that work is in progress.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you for your presentation this morning. It was fantastic. Question, Vanessa, just on the flood prone, the hazards focus for your team and the TA issuing notices. Is this just to land that is yet to be built on, or what is the implication here for flood zone land where there are residential homes?
So the Building Act has had these sections in it for quite some time. So any time we assess an application, if there is a natural hazard known to be on that land, we should be making that assessment, whether it's impacting the work that's going to be done. So it applies to any application we get, be it for fresh land or alterations to an existing building. It's fair to say, I guess it's a really challenging part of the legislation, and there has been a reluctance over the years to apply it, because one of the automatic implications that we've seen in the past is if we put a notice on a site, typically the homeowner then struggles to actually get any insurance cover. So I haven't seen what they are intending to do in terms of whether they're going to redraft those sections or whether they're going to give us more guidance. We'll expect to see that in the first quarter of next year, I would imagine.
Great, thank you. Second question, the difference between the building consents that were issued and the code compliance, is that sort of a considered risk for the department? Like, what's the implication there? Obviously there's a rates implication.
Yep, typically we see the code compliance certificates being issued for the likes of housing company houses and that, because they won't get their final payment and they won't allow homeowners to move in until that happens. So the difference that's there, it does get mopped up eventually because there's a clause in the Building Act that if somebody hasn't applied for their co-compliance certificate within 2 years of the consent being granted, we can then make a decision. So we do regular follow-up on ones that have hit 2 years, and either give them an extension of time if it's a significant project that's taking longer to build, or they've had delays and they can give us a reasonable time frame in which they're going to complete that we're comfortable with. It's in our best interests to ensure co-compliance certificates are issued promptly, because our liability period of 10 years kicks in from the date of that certificate.
Thank you. Emma, congratulations on your team's ability to remain flexible with all of this change. In terms of the fast track process, have there been like cases to the one mentioned on Birches that have been heard? Do you sort of look at the likelihood of that going through or not? And obviously there's an implication there for wastewater management.
Yeah, so obviously with the Fast Track Approvals Act, there's different criteria for making decisions on those applications. Then it'll be different criteria to what that development has previously been considered under. And one of the things, the purpose of the Fast Track Approvals Act is about delivering projects that have regional or national benefits. So if it passes that hurdle, then that it has primacy over the normal things that we would usually be considering with we still consider those things are still considered through a Fast Track Approvals Act. What I'm trying to say is I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see. Certainly there are this type of development is being consented in other areas through Fast Track Approvals Act. It remains to be seen. Servicing is a fairly hard constraint to overcome, though. So my understanding is there is a constraint with the size of the pipe that runs from Prebbleton back to Pines. So that's a big thing to overcome. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. And I know that the councils or Selwyn Water's thinking will be evolving. New plans, new infrastructure strategies are being developed. So just the timing of all of these things will probably be important too. So just how quickly we see that application and what the lay of the land with servicing is at that time. And whether, the other option is that maybe they'll get consent, but there's a condition on it that it can't really be implemented until that capacity arrives. So that there's potentially a bit of a middle ground there.
Great, thank you.
Good. Thanks, Sarah. Big Red.
What's the council's position on Greenfields development?
I'm not sure that there's an overall position. I don't think that there's been a position taken that it's either good or bad. I think when a proposal for rezoning comes to us, we consider it on its merits in accordance with the legislation that we have.
Right, yeah. And then with the high HPL land, if you can prove that's in the 30-year plan, you guys for that as well?
With what?
If you can prove that it's within the 30-year plan, would you support that?
So it's one piece of the puzzle. So,
right.
So all of the other things, all of the things that you're looking at when rezoning land, you're looking at constraints like flooding, like servicing capacity, like transport links. The HPL is one of them, and need. Do we need this land rezoned? So there's a lot of things, but what the MPS HPL does is it almost introduces like a gateway. So like we either need this rezoned or we don't. We need the capacity to contribute to our 30 years or we don't. So if we don't, that's almost like a hard line. There's no point making all those other considerations because you're not going to pass this hurdle.
Yeah, and just the reason for those two questions was just like, you look at our main centre, particularly Lincoln, Prebleton, and probably north of Rolleston, like that's the direction they're going to go, and it is, it is all HPL land. Flood assessment certificates, was that government-led or was that council-led?
No, that was introduced through our district plan. It was a provision that was introduced to align with the regional policy statement, which is an ECAN-led document. And so the regional policy statement says that we have to manage development within flood-prone areas and set minimum floor levels above the 1 in 200 year event.
So with future subdivisions, as titles are issued, will it still become an individual thing that you've got to do with the building report?
No, and we've recognised that early on. As new subdivisions come through, we work with developers to get a global flood assessment certificate across their development, so that the individual buys the lot and then they're not stuck with this admin of figuring out what their minimum floor level should be. It should come with the vacant lot.
Wonderful. So obviously the next few years there'll be a bit of lag period, but then it'll naturally catch up.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely some pain in the middle, but we'll get there.
Beautiful. And then just the mobile coffee vans and mobile food businesses, do they actually need to a food safety certificate? They're actually all registered?
Yes, anyone that's selling food, i.e. a mobile food truck or a coffee caravan would need to have registered and have been verified through a national program.
Right. And then does that need to be on display at an event?
Yes, it should be.
Right. Beautiful. And then just with the granny flat legislation, the questions and paperwork there, Lydia, if we can get some costings around what it's going to cost to chuck on a limb and stuff like that, that'd be great too, please. Thank you.
Cool, noted. We'll get some information back on that. Sophie.
Kia ora, ladies. Thank you very much for coming and welcome, Jackie. Good to meet you. So I've got a couple of questions. One of them is around enforcement action on resource consents, because I know some of the fees changed recently, I believe, like that we were allowed, if not fees, the penalties if somebody was found to have breached consent. Does that come closer, or does it like actually cover the cost of the enforcement action yet?
So with when somebody applies for resource consent, there's consent monitoring fees. I don't have the exact percentage as to whether that is fully cost recovered as we monitor those consents. I can't respond in terms of how many infringement offence notices we may have issued under the RMA, but I can look into that and get back to you on that one.
Yeah, because it was the ones in the RMA that were changed, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, another question was around bylaw reviews. Just wondering if one of you could possibly give us a brief description of how a bylaw review goes, and then roughly what our time frame is across the year, because I know we've got a few this year, and it's one of those questions that people come back with a lot, especially regarding things like parking and dogs and that sort of thing.
Yes, so when central government develops a piece of legislation, they often enable a local territorial authority to build in secondary legislation which allows us to have our own local district flavour, i.e. a bylaw. So we do have a number of bylaws and policies that we can either develop or review as part of that primary legislation. So we have a public places bylaw, which is quite significant, that we will be looking to do some reviews on. We have a local dog control bylaw and policy, which was recently reviewed and is currently up to date. We have traffic and roading bylaw, which is currently being reviewed. We have a gambling policy, which is coming up for review. Look, we have a number of these that require review in the coming year. I don't have the exact list, and they don't just sit within the regulatory team. But generally speaking, when we develop a new bylaw, it requires a review within 5 years of it having been adopted. When it's been through its first 5 years, then it generally doesn't need to be reviewed for another 10 years from there. But there are some exceptions to that rule. For instance, the Gambling Act requires us to have a gambling policy, and that requires a review every 3 years. So it's generally 5 for the first round, then 10 years. But yeah, as I said, there are some exceptions under certain legislation. Hopefully that answers the question, but I can get you a list of
Jackie, that would be really handy to provide a list of the bylaws and the dates. If you could give us a schedule, that would be great.
Yes.
Yeah, because some of them are going to require public consultation and hearings and all that sort of stuff as well, eh?
Yes, they will, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Okay, last question, I promise. So just this week, obviously the government's decided they're going to change the fast track approvals bill again. And it sounds like that's going to be a really short submissions process. So I'm not sure whether that's an Emma question or actually a Kath question. Are we ready to hit what it might be like a 5-day window at the rate that they're going at the moment?
My team is certainly on standby, waiting to see all these changes to start thinking about shaping up a submission. If it's a really quick turnaround, that's obviously challenging in terms of having councillors shape that to the level that you'd want to. But we will do our best through. So what we've done in the past is tried to get your feedback via email and submitted the submission and brought it back at a later time for you to retrospectively approve it. So that's an option. There's other options around delegating particular councillors to this decision making.
Yeah, and I think that the team certainly share all the information to hand with all the councillors as we get it. You're quite correct. The timeframes are getting shorter for responding to submissions. Over the Christmas period, we're expecting quite a number of submissions to be launched by central government, and as I briefly talked to last week at the orientation, it would perhaps be helpful, and we can bring a paper to council in December where there are some nominated councillors for final sign-off on some of the submissions that we expect to see through, because we anticipate that they'll want them through by the middle of January, which is extremely tight.
Cool. Thank you very much, everyone.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. It's really painful if you've got a 5-day window to put a submission in, and so in that space, it is the timeframes that are really constrained for us. So, the process is that the team try and form something, send it through to us via email to try and form our ideas so that we can feed into that to give any feedback in there, and it is retrospective endorsement, which is not in the ideal case, but sometimes better than not submitting on these things.
And we also team tag in with the Canterbury Mayoral Forum. So recognising, because there are 11 councils in the Canterbury region, and it's really hard for small councils to be able to respond. So what we try to do is that Canterbury Mayoral Forum Secretariat will perhaps try and take a lead on pulling together a submission. We will share that, and sometimes it's about we can take elements out, or it is simply that there is councillor agreement to actually support the Mayoral Forum submission. We do the same with Christchurch, Greater Christchurch Partnership as well. So we look at lots of different ways. We also have Taitura and LGNZ. They have the resources funded to be able to respond to some of these really gnarly legislations that come out. And again, they share that information with us. And again, we can pull elements of that out or actually adopt the submission that we make. So there's lots of different strands that we try to pull together to give you as many best options with a Selwyn flavour for you.
Thanks, Sharon. Denise?
Sorry, I thought of another question just because Brendan was talking about food trucks and it made me think about Lincoln. We've got a vacant lot in Lincoln next to the pharmacy, and there's usually one, sometimes two, maybe three food trucks on there. Do they have consents, or do they have to go through a process to be there?
I can look into that particular situation, but if they were supplying food, even if they were operating on a private piece of land, they would need to be registered and verified to operate, regardless of the trading in public places.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. We're running pretty good to time. And again, if there are things that you have questions on, if you want to dive back in and have a look at what the team have presented this morning, I'm more than happy to take further questions from that. But otherwise, apart from that, we will wrap that one up. Thank you, ladies, for the presentation and the Q&A that you've done this morning. It's really good. So we will break, and I will see you back here ready to go at 11 a.m. we have all things risk. Julie and Dom, I did have Kath written there too. She might be chiming in on this one too. Cool, so take it away, ladies.
Hi, thanks for having me back again. You might be starting to see I've turned up here with a few different hats. So I'm here today as the head of risk, rather than as the head of legal. So the purpose of, and I've got Dominica here with me because as of Friday I will be on leave for 7 months, and Dominica will be legal and risk lead for that time. So I just wanted to introduce you all. What you've got before me today is I don't have a presentation, apologies, I'm just going to speak to the paper that we've given to you. I won't speak to every single word on the page, obviously, but what I am going to do is walk through the general themes in the order that they're coming in the paper. I've given you a lot of attachments, and what I'm happy to do is take some questions around the risk, around our framework, around our journey, where we are on it and how we've gotten here, and really just kind of start to introduce how we're doing this at Selwyn District Council specifically. And I think probably that's a really good place to start is the history. Where are we and how have we gotten here? So as of about mid last year, we didn't have a dedicated risk management function or a dedicated internal audit function at Selwyn District Council. It was more happened on an ad hoc manner. So part of what Sharon introduced and Steve Gibbling introduced when they arrived was let's really get our arms around this and start understanding our risk, start looking at our controls, and start doing this in the way a mature, high-growth organisation needs to operate to ensure that we are able to strategically deliver on our outcomes and look at our operational outcomes. So that began with a refresh, employment of the risk manager, myself as well, at the same time that we in-house legal, and looked at a refresh of our risk management framework and our risk policy. Now, there had been some dabblings around some risk registers in 2017 and 2020, I believe, but nothing had really embedded in council in form of a regular reporting framework. So what happened in December last year is we brought a refreshed policy and a refreshed framework to council after it had gone through audit and risk, setting a direct trajectory on how we were going to do this for council. Off the back of that, we have been working for the last, I think, 10 months to build a strategic risk register, an organisational risk register of our top risks, and now working back down to go department level risk registers, which will then feed up into that. We have worked at doing some initial scene setting around risk appetite. That's not done. Was very much your initial taster of ELT in the previous council. That will need to be reset with this council. Once you've set your strategic direction and you've decided what is the appropriate levels of risk in our various areas for us to be taking on as a council for officers to work towards. And we have also just been doing work with our teams and our groups on actually starting to understand and mature the way we talk about risk. That risk is a good thing. We should, every time we talk about strategy, every time we talk about delivery, every time we talk about projects, we should be talking about risk. Because if we can shine a light on risk before it eventuates, before it occurs, we can put controls in place, we can mitigate, we can design better projects, and we can ultimately deliver better outcomes, whether that be more financially efficient outcomes because things aren't coming in sideways, whether it's better reputation, lower legal risk. There's a variety of things that sit around this. So in terms of risk, what you'll see we're talking about here is, and this is part of our really maturity journey in council had only really before we began this 18 months ago talked about operational risk, which is your delivery. You want to deliver a project or you want to deliver a thing, and actually what's going to stop us doing that particular thing. what we have now also started to talk about, because while that is really important, is our strategic risk. Is so once we have, and that'll need reviewing, of course, once you have set our strategic direction, is when we talk about our strategy, what are the big things that are pan-organisational, that are outside of us, that are in our environment, that might actually say, if these things were to come to pass and they weren't controlled, they could stop us fulfilling our strategic objectives rather than just the operational delivery that sits below those strategic objectives. So that is really starting to kind of lift the way that we're thinking about risk as a council. Now I say all of this, but I do say this in that, and I hope I'm not using this word too much, we are on a maturity journey here. We haven't gotten to where the end of that journey is. We're probably, in my head, I think it's probably a 3-ish year journey from where we started. We're about a year probably into that. So that's kind of where we're at on that. You have attached the current copy of our strategic risk register that went to 6 months ago as the first time that was presented to Audit and Risk. Need me to speak a little bit louder? Sorry.
I've also, Julie, just for you to be aware, I've asked for the paper to be up on screen for those councillors that haven't accessed it on Diligent, but also for our public to see. So if you wish to reference specific pages in your presentation, please do so that so councillors know where they're looking when you speak to it, if that's okay.
Yes, sure.
Yes.
Yes, so we have the risk registers, on page 7 we talk around the risk registers, when those were put together and when those were first presented to Council and Audit and Risk Committee. We have also, this last in August, presented this top 45 risk register to Audit and Risk for the first time. This is the first time this is coming to a council. The previous council hadn't seen it yet. And we are working continuously to improve our mapping of controls that sit alongside these in terms of what are our processes in place that actually start to lower these risk levels. So you'll see on quite a few of our risks, we actually think we've got some reasonably good controls in place already. We've done some reasonable drops there are some that have dropped from 20 at an inherent uncontrolled level down to 9, for example, with a control environment in place. Now, that's great, but what we're also constantly doing is going out, doing regular meetings with ELT and our heads of departments and our team leads to make sure that these are being validated, that they are in place, how they're functioning, and are they actually dropping things down as often as they could. Now, as well as they could. And has anything changed in our environment or the way we operate that actually says we need to be lifting these? So it is very much risk is a little bit of an art. There's a little bit of a process in it, but there's a little bit of an art in it and understanding actually how we operate and how that eventuates. These are living documents, so they will regularly get updated, and we will for the members of the Audit and Risk Committee, these will come to you in full this first meeting. And then what we will hope to do on an ongoing basis is start to report to you on an exceptions basis, so you can really start to see, here are the ones that are moving on a regular basis, here's why they're moving, and then we can start to hone in on what's actually happening in our environment and start to have those sorts of discussions. I think we've talked a little bit about the risk appetite workshops. Please forgive me if I'm telling people what they already know, but risk appetite, when you talk about it, is how much risk as a council in the pursuit of our objectives are we willing to take on? Now, the reason we think appetite is really important and it's good to map it and be directed by council on it is, if I have a risk, for example, that has at a residual level, once the controls are applied, it sits in at moderate level, so at say a 9 or a 10. If council has said, actually, for that particular risk, we're really happy with a moderate level of carrying a moderate level of risk, because we have to have some risk, we can't do everything without risk. Well, that gives us a really clear direction for decision making as council to go, okay, actually our controls are good enough because we're where council wants us to be. If, however, that risk was sitting, you said you wanted that to be a moderate risk and we were actually starting to lift up into the high area, that allows us to come to you and to audit and risk and say, this risk is lifting, we are investigating extra controls, here are extra controls we think we can put in place, or additional resource we think is needed. And then it's a decision-making process to, do we still think the appetite is right as a global council? And if the appetite is right, are we willing to invest in those additional controls to drop that risk? Or for a period of time, are you happy to just be carrying a higher level of risk? So it starts allowing us to use risk as a decision-making tool as well and be strategic about where we're investing.
Sorry, I'll give some context and an example. The implementation of artificial intelligence into the pools, that was a result of a risk that occurred. The risk was brought to council. Council asked audit and risk to look at the risk, look at the opportunity, and take some advice. And part of the feedback from audit and risk was around utilising artificial intelligence. So when it came to the last long-term plan, the process showed it had been to council. Council asked audit and risk to look at the risk. A recommendation was made from audit and risk around the implementation of artificial intelligence, and then that was pulled through into the next long-term plan, and the councillors agreed to fund as part of the digital upgrades artificial intelligence into the pool. So just to give you a bit of context around the process, and that's a really good example of what we had. Sorry, Julie.
No, you're fine. And then just on the last page of the substantive report on page 9 there, this is all great in theory, but if our people don't understand it, it doesn't work. So the next big part and a real focus, which you'll see on our roadmap over the next 6 to 12 months, which is an attachment to the paper, is on communication and training for risk and ensuring that we're getting our reporting structures right so that people are seeing and engaging with these on a regular basis and we're getting good flows of information so we can keep the Audit and Risk Committee informed and they in turn can keep you and direct and keep you informed. So before I jump into, would you like me to jump in internal audit now or would you like to pause for questions?
I think we pause and wrap this, and then if you jump into audit.
No problem.
It's okay. So, yeah, happy to take questions on risk. First up is Samuel.
Thank you. I've gone through it. I've found one mention of injury, serious injury or death to an employee, but none to a member of the public. I think that would be pretty major reputational damage.
Sure. So what you have in front of you are our top 45 organisational risks on the basis of a residual risk rating, so with controls applied. So the actual risk of it occurring and the consequence once we have controlled for it. What we also have that sits alongside this, which John will come talk to you about this afternoon, are our critical risks for health and safety. And those, so that the health and safety risks that sit here and the strategic one as a overarching, and then we have structures that sit below that, because you are absolutely right, it is a really important risk and it is a risk that we do consider and take care of, and John will be able to talk to you a little bit more about that this afternoon.
Cool. And what liability would we carry for Selwyn Water Limited?
For Selwyn Water Limited, it will be much lower than you carry for yourself. So again, I do know it's a portion of his presentation this afternoon. It is on overlapping duties.
Cool.
So we will get more information on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. More just a general comment, and it's probably common sense, but risk, it is important, and the ISO standards are a great base, but it can, as you're probably well aware, lead to a tick box exercise, and really, as you mentioned, It's the organisational efficiency to make sure that what should be happening is happening. And it was really just a comment about the local government risk agency puts out good guidance templates, and there's also the Office of the Auditor General's expectations. So without getting too much into operational, I presume they've been incorporated into the process.
Yes, we have taken the OAG best guidance and LG guidance, and we've also looked across in building both the registers and the frameworks. We've looked across our colleagues and pulled some examples from other high growth and other growing councils and tried to align with what we can see as good practice across the country as well.
Cool, thank you. Aaron.
This is not the place for going into an in-depth discussion, but I just want to place on the record that I have a concern with the definition of likelihood that we're using that focuses on if the risk event happens and then there's consequences. And to use an example, the chance of a lightning strike happening is very rare, but if a lightning strike happened, then the consequences of damage would be very highly likely. So if we focus on the if the thing happens rather than the chance of the thing happening, we end up with what we've got now is lots and lots of red and what I believe is an exaggerated level of risk that we're facing, which can become overwhelming to deal with.
Sure. That is standard practice across risk management in New Zealand. So we're using a very standardised framework. I'm happy through CE to take direction to relook at it if that's what we'd like.
I think that there will be a workshop because we, as we're still in the evolutionary stage, this council needs to have oversight of the risks, and I would think early in the new year we will have a workshop probably for half a day that steps through, and then that allows this council to give guidance in terms of your appetite for risk.
Thank you.
Yep, cool, thank you. Tracy.
Probably a question for you and for Sharon. What was it historically about SDC that allowed risk to take a bit of a back seat? Now, I know that neither of you were in the organisation in 2017 and so on, so I'm just asking because if we know why we didn't do something, then it gives us a context for things to look out for as well.
I'll respond to that. Thanks, Tracy. And you're absolutely right, because neither Julia or I were here present. And it's not to say that there wasn't a focus on risk. It was at an operational level. I think it would be fair to say that from a growth point of view, this council has done an amazing job being able to respond to the significant growth. And in terms of that has been, really challenging for the organisation. And so therefore the resources and thoughts and thinking have been going into that. And there's been a transition from Selwyn being a small council. It is no longer a small council. It is up there with the metropole, which means that just simply in the cycle of the growth of the organisation needs to grow and change and to have that different focus. And I guess in the 2 years that I've been here, that's what I've brought around to actually putting some of these fundamental things in place. So it's not a criticism of the previous, because there was an operational risk element there, but I think it really is about the growth and the extraordinary growth and a mind shift of small council to now what is a mini metro tipping into a metro council, and different requirements associated with that.
Yeah, I think it also, this work that's happened here is fed into Sharon's KPIs when we employed her to develop this framework, because it was a piece of the puzzle that was missing. So yeah, it doesn't happen overnight either. It's a big body of work, so it's slowly being pulled together. Cool, Sarah.
Thank you very much for your work. The group operational risk registers, what are those, please?
So those are currently in development. So that is coming to each group and saying at an operational level, what are your risks? And the idea is what we want to build is what we call risk interconnectivity, which is simply saying that actually from a project level to a department level to a group level, we can start right up to your top 45 organisational risks that are then linked to your strategic risks. We can start to see a line of sight that goes, actually there's a risk that we've noticed here in a really small thing, but we've noticed it across maybe 4 projects. And then that's starting to come up to a department level to a group level. And then as things escalate, they come right up the chain. So you can actually start to have some confidence that the things that you're seeing on the organisational risk register are coming right down through the organisation, so that's some validity. We're in process of building that. We're not there, but that is the structure.
Great, thank you. Next question. Is the same sort of risk framework going to be developed through CCOs? Is there something around that?
CCOs develop their own risk framework with their boards being responsible for that. They're with their own flavours.
Yeah, but they will follow some of the principles that are laid down in legislation around best practice. It's just that it will be fit for purpose for their CCO.
Thank you.
Cool. No other questions on risk at the moment? Cool.
Great. And as I say, I'm more than happy to have more conversations, and we will be at audit and risk.
And we will come out with a timetable for a workshop dedicated to risk early in the new year.
Absolutely. So I'm going to jump you back to page 6 of the substantive report and just talk a little bit around internal audit. The reason this part of the report is so much smaller is simply because we work as a facilitator to our external auditor. So we went out to market, I believe it was end of 2023 or beginning of 2024, for a internal audit company who we then, following a procurement process, selected Deloitte, who come in and do independent internal audits on some key critical risk areas. Now, at the time, because we didn't have the strategic level risk register or our top 45 organisational risks mapped at that point in time, the program was recommended by Deloitte on the basis of, with the other 20, 30 odd councils they act for, these are predominantly where these councils start as their key critical risk areas. Now, what we have done, that was how a year one of our program was built, which we did sensitive expenditure, revenue and financing policy, and our counter fraud and corruptions initiative. Now, what came out of those was a series of recommendations, and then a set of management actions were committed to. We track those management actions every quarter and report on the progress against those to Audit and Risk Committee so that they are watched, we can check that they're being implemented, and there is a line of sight, oversight on it. When we have just in August, with the Audit and Risk Committee, per their terms of reference, set the program for this financial year. It largely follows the recommendation from Deloitte, but we did go through a process of validating against what we started to know were our top organisational risks and where there were some operational areas in the business we wanted to have a look at to check whether or not these were right or not, that they were aligning. So that's where we're at for this year. We have just finished the payroll audit that is going to the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting. We've just received the final report this week. We have completed the privacy audit, and we will be commencing an audit into our procurement framework and processes early in the new year for reporting to the April Audit and Risk Committee meeting. And then at the end of the year, we will look at something around that asset management capital project space and do that in direction with the Audit and Risk Committee. So again, happy to take questions on that. If it's questions that I can't remember off the top of my head from the specific internal audit, I'm happy to come back and give a written response to those.
Thank you, Julie. Elizabeth.
Hey Julie, just very quickly, well, not too quickly, and go as much as I like. What's the major difference between that Deloitte report and what they focused on versus what we get from Audit New Zealand?
So Audit New Zealand is an external auditor that audits us against our financial standards. What these audits are is looking at, as a council, our policies and our processes and our systems and our controls. Do they work effectively in the way that they should work? And do we have the right controls in place? So it's more around our control environment than are we doing the right thing?
Cool. Thanks, Julie. Samuel? We might have to come back to you because you've turned, yeah. Is that a... Okay, can I circle back to you because... Samuel?
That internal audit, is that where they took a select few of transactions, 40 I think the figure was, is that the one? And then gave us a rating of 2 out of 5?
I would probably need a bit more detail as to what audit and what we're looking at, but if you'd like to send it to me, I'm happy to look and give you that answer.
Cool, awesome, thank you.
Sophie?
Kia ora, ladies. The previous internal audits came back with like sort of recommendations and actions and everything, and I know that some of them also had what was already being implemented as a result of those. Is that going to continue to be reported back to Audit and Risk or full council? Or both?
It can be. It gets reported. Will be reported to Audit and Risk quarterly, and as directed to council.
Cool. And then does it follow up at the end with like a re-audit to go, okay, we're good now?
We can look at that as our cycle. That's something to discuss with Audit and Risk. We do between 3 and 4 a year. So it's a matter of Audit and Risk directing us and going, actually, we're really comfortable you've put those controls in place and that they're effective. Or actually, we think that area was so important, we want to confirm. So it's that prioritisation, right?
So
of the
assessing
resource.
where we need it and resourcing it.
Exactly.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A little bit further to that, so we obviously have an independent chair of Audit and Risk, and so what should actually be happening is reports coming back to full council and the independent chair presenting those and the findings and recommendations back to us. So that is something that will start to happen with Audit and Risk. There will be full presentations to us as a group at full council. Yeah. Do you want to... Sorry. If we go John, but keep your light on, mate.
Sorry. Yes. And I suppose it comes back to my earlier comment about organisational risk and probably also organisational culture, that my colleague raised a matter which I'm not speaking on his behalf, but did raise for me the recollection of the sensitive expenditure. And I would have thought that, and I'm not being critical, I'm just looking at it from a governance point of view, that the awareness of a sensitive expenditure policy shouldn't really need a lot of staff training and development. And I'm just sort of would like a little bit of clarification if it's appropriate. How does that fit into the new project way that we're looking at strategic risk?
So sensitive expenditure does sit as a risk on our registers. I'm not sure if it sits in the top 45. It might be down in the 90 now that we've done the audit and done some of the actions. May I have a look and come back to you on that? I think probably what you'll see if you look through the internal audits that have come through the last year, is there were some areas we knew we needed to look at, and Sharon and ELT directed needed looking at, and that comes through in the reports where it said we knew there was an issue here, that management raised that there might be an issue here. We've gone and looked at that, and here's what we've found. So I think that's probably, you're right. Sometimes as Sharon said, we're on a continuing journey of continuous improvement, and we will find things that we need to work on. It's as you kind of alluded to, it's making sure that we're following through on those actions and actually doing it.
Thank you.
Okay, go.
Great. Just coming back to the original question. So obviously we talked about Audit New Zealand, and you'd given us a list of a few things that they looked at, which is policy, process, systems, controls, etc. Could you just elaborate in a bit more detail the difference between what you're looking at with Audit New Zealand versus what we got from the Deloitte report, just so we're really clear on
So
what
sorry.
the significant areas Deloitte's actually done?
So that's what I meant. Sorry, apologies if I haven't been very clear around systems, controls, processes, effectiveness of our internal systems. That's internal audit. That's run by Deloitte. The annual report that looks back at our financials, have we delivered against LTP, etc. That is the external audit, which is OAG. Does that answer the question?
Cool. Thank you. Denise.
Listening previously, they've talked a lot about operating outside of policy. Is it Sharon that authorises the working out of policy, and do we have a process now for informing councillors about that? That was my first question. And are you re-looking at the hedge policy, because there was a lot of talk about excessive or surplus cash going forward, and how we're going to manage that?
Sure. In terms of working outside policy, it would really depend on what the policy was, what it is, whether it's being done actively. So
I think what you're referencing is the revenue and finance policy, and that was discussed by auditors, but that is an internal policy as opposed to an external, and that was the reason that it was brought to audit and risk, and whether it was within the parameters of that. And so as the revenue and finance policy is reviewed, there will be an opportunity to look at how that policy is laid out. But it was about the internal mechanisms that had been set by council. Usually as a whole, if there is a acting outside of policy, it would usually be required to be brought up to council. And again, part of, I think, as we're putting our systems and processes and our reporting in place, we probably haven't had the visibility, for the want of a better word, that's what I'm looking for, around knowing sometimes, occasionally when something has taken place outside of policy. Mm-hmm. We've tightened up our internal mechanisms to make sure that that is not so problematic anymore.
Okay. So we'll come back to the whole council. Anything that happens.
Yeah, the risk and audit policy, it gets reviewed as part of long-term plan and occasionally annual plan as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Samuel.
Cool. Just to clarify, it was the 6th of May that I was talking about, and it's 52 in the sensitive expenditure register that were sampled. Just to clarify. And have we got any measure of how we've remediated those concerns that were brought up in that Deloitte report?
yes, I don't have them off the top of my head, but they will come as part of the audit and risk internal audit report back, and I can ask the fuller version for all the recommendations as reported.
Nice to see them done. Thank you.
All right. I think that might be you, Julie and Dom. But I note that there's some follow-up questions from councillors in that space. So feel free to send those through, and we can address those questions to everybody. I did have a little bit longer for this aside, but you are free to go. We might just give a minute and see if Denise can bring her presentation forward. So if we just hold for a minute, please. Team, just because we had scheduled this for after lunch, so there are some changes of having to bring staff in to bring the agenda forward. What I recommend that we actually do is pause now, continue with regular programming of community services and facilities after lunch, but we will shut the live stream down now and we can actually do some councillor only time. If everyone's agreeable to that? Okay, wonderful, thank you.